Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'll also say good morning, good evening, and good day, considering that there are participants joining us online from different time zones. Welcome to this session on AI readiness in Africa in a shifting geopolitical landscape. The session is hosted by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, together with its partners on stage. I'm very, very, very honored to be moderating this very timely discussion. My name is Ashna Kalemela. I work as Programs Manager at CIPESA. CIPESA is the Collaboration on International ICT Policy for East and Southern Africa. I'm sure we'll all agree with me that there's huge transformative potential of AI in society, from innovation to socio-economic development. However, there are also very significant risks. These include inadequate governance frameworks, which risk deepening inequality, weakening democracy, and reinforcing technological dependencies. In Africa particularly, countries are striving to build sovereign and resilient AI ecosystems in tandem with a fast-evolving geopolitical landscape. This landscape is marked by shifting alliances, intensifying technological rivalry, and growing economic pressure. Whereas various stakeholders are engaging on these issues, the continent remains underrepresented in global AI development as well as discourse. Locally driven solutions are constrained by limited investments in research, regulatory gaps, and the dominance of multinational tech companies. Meanwhile, concerns about digital exploitation and economic disparities when it comes to data processing, training of models, and low-wage labor markets in Africa also prevail. The risk of AI-driven digital neocolonialism is growing. As global powers compete for technological influence, Africa must strengthen its position to ensure AI serves local needs rather than external interests. African nations at the moment have a unique opportunity to establish AI governance models that are rooted in fairness, in transparency, and inclusion. These AI frameworks also have the potential to align with local realities and normative considerations. These frameworks hopefully are able to foster innovation, uphold democracy, and human rights. Our speakers today, who represent a very broad spectrum of stakeholder groups, will highlight the challenges and opportunities for securing an AI future that benefits Africa. The speaker lineup includes Shiko Gitau, who's joining us virtually. She's the CEO of Kala, private sector in Kenya. We have Mr. Lassina Kone, the Director General and CEO of Smart Africa from Cote d'Ivoire, Enchanté. Machane Babakar Ahmed, the Special Envoy of the Mauritanian Ministry of Digital Transformation and Public Administration Modernization for the Government of Mauritania. We have Malindi Msalango, the Deputy Director General of the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, the South African government. And to my immediate left, a very old and good friend, Nima Iya, the founder and executive director of Policy, a civil society organization based in my home country, Uganda. Our online moderation is being done by Dennis Brumand, the advisor of the Global Project on Digital Transformation, GIZ. You're all welcome once again, and we'll kick off the conversation with a lightning round, which is a one-sentence response I expect from the speakers here. And the question is, what must be done today to ensure that AI strengthens rather than undermines democratic governance in Africa? I'll start with my left. Over to you, Nima.
Thank you so much for the question, and I'm very pleased to be here. I thought they were always on.
I could hear you.
Okay. I'll start again. Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. Apologies for the mic
malfunction. So I was saying that AI is already undermining governance in Africa, and we're seeing this through automated disinformation campaigns, the eroding of public trust, manipulation of political discourse, and surveillance tools that are used to stifle voices at scale. These harms are often gendered, and a lot of our work is looking at a feminist perspective on new technological tools. And these harms are magnified in contexts that have weak data protection and limited digital literacy, which really opens the door to abuse. So, as such, I would say that we need AI that is based on accountability, trust, and a big component of public education. And this will include, for example, impact assessments, regional coalitions, investment in ethical and open source alternatives that work within our context and are based on our realities and that are focused on care and justice rather than control and extraction. Thank you, Ashna. Back to you.
Thanks, Nimba. Same question to you, Mr. Mlindi. What must be done today to ensure that AI strengthens rather than undermines democratic governance on the continent?
No, thank you, Margarita. No, I think on my side, I just would like to say that what is important is that we need to institutionalize the transparent, inclusive AI governance frameworks that are grounded in the constitutional values of public participation, to ensure that AI supports accountable service delivery, social justice, as well as democratic resilience. But also some of the areas that I would like to highlight is the issue of removing bias from the data sets that are used to train the AI systems. Because if we are not removing these biases and also not including, a large pool of, demographics in terms of data sets, you'll find that you're going to have, the challenges, and which will then undermine, the democratic governance. But also, I think the last one that I just want to highlight is the explainable AI, whereby we would like to advocate to say that whatever decisions that are taken by the AI systems, they need to be explainable, and they need to be based on, some human oversight, so I think those are some of the areas that I'd just like to highlight on my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving to my right, Mr. Kone.
Thank you very much for inviting me and Smart Africa. It's an honor, under, of course, our partner, BMZ, GIZ. In fact, can you hear me? What you just mentioned, I would say the impact is it's actually worse than all of this. We talked about the bias of the AI. Don't forget, today, even if you have a PhD degree, you can still be ignorant in terms of AI. Okay. If we go based on a foundation that is not enough to go to school, but you have to adapt to AI, and we all know that the inclusions definitions in Africa is completely different from the inclusion definitions in the West. Because we believe that the AI will be the equalizer, be able to include people who do not speak any other language. Remember, we have more than 2,000 languages in Africa. So if we allow those languages to be trained on the AI system, but not trained by us, it basically means even indigenous people will be impacted by any cultural biases using AI. Therefore, all what my predecessor have just mentioned is very true. So, but what do we do about it? We cannot be we can no longer be passively optimistic. We have to be deliberately intentional. That's why Smart Africa have put together last April Africa Council of AI Council for Africa. What does that actually mean? The AI Council for Africa will look at 5 different things. One, computing power. Collectively today, more than 50 countries on our continent, do we have a necessary power and a computing power to be able to train our data? 2, it's going to look at the data set. No matter what other people said, Africa today is the number 1 frontier in terms of availability of data to train AI. Number 3, is going to look at the algorithm which is actually the cultural bias, what goes on into the AI to be able to respond to people. And number 4 is the AI governance. In the AI governance side today, there are today about 19 countries in Africa who have already developed their national AI strategy. It's our role at Smart Africa to be able to harmonize those policies to be aligned exactly to be what the high level of the UN commissioners, they came up together with the AI governance, as well as looking into what European have put together in terms of safeguarding. Of course, all of this have to be aligned with the AI strategy developed by the African Union. And number 5 is the market. I think what is happening today, what has happened, but what do we need to do about it? We need to be doing these things intentionally. It's actually worse than what you think. Because currently in the Africa, on our continent, there are over 1,000 startups who are downloading on a daily basis the API from Open Frontier, Open AI Frontier model, as well as the DeepSeek, which is the Chinese. But they're training those models are not located on our continent. They're located outside the continent. An AI system is the way once you train the server, you can never get the information back again. So what do we do about it? It actually goes to even to look at the foundational model of our relationship with our partners in Europe. What do we do? Based on the fact that if you look at North America, everything is based on the private sector base, which is the heart of the capitalism. When we look at the East, it's based on the control of the government. And Africa wants to go with the user-centric approach for everything. So it's time for us to actually be able to look at the AI, not the most powerful one, but the most useful one, by looking at our values, by looking or preserving our languages, to be able to create opportunity not for few, but for the many. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kone. Over to you, Madam Ahmed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, moderator. I'm fully agree with what my colleagues have mentioned right now, but I would like to summarize it in 2 words. To ensure AI makes democratic governance stronger in Africa, we must invest now in inclusive, transparent AI policy frameworks that are co-created with African voices. Second, these frameworks must be grounded in human rights and supported by strong civic oversight. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for the very quick lightning round. We'll now deep dive into specific questions per sector, per experience, per expertise. And I'll stay with you, Madam Ahmed. Mauritania was amongst the first African countries to launch a national AI strategy. What key challenges have you faced in translating this strategy into tangible actions? And how are you addressing coordinated institutional ownership and inclusivity to ensure a democratic and locally rooted AI in Africa?
Thank you very much for this important question. Yes, Mauritania has developed an AI strategy with the support of German cooperation through BMZ and GIZ. But to implement that strategy, we are facing some challenges. Let me first start by infrastructure availability in rural area. As you maybe know, Mauritania has a huge surface, and there are about 1 square kilometer surface. And there is a lot of small villages far away from each other. That makes difficult to serve more than 20% of population living in this area. So we are facing this reality, but we hope to address it as soon as possible with the support of government partners, like German cooperation through KfW and European Union too, and World Bank. Another challenge is limited capacity and technical expertise, which slowed this strategy implementation. To address this, we are investing in partnerships with universities and international organizations to build local skills and knowledges. We faced also coordination problem across government and sector. And to tackle this, we are established we established an interministerial working group to ensure alignment between the AI strategy and national development priorities with regular consultation among stakeholders. We are also aware that ownership and inclusivity are crucial. That's why our approach has focused on creating a participatory process, engaging civil society, local tech communities, and youth in shaping policies and pilot projects. This will ensure that our AI applications are relevant, trusted, and anchored in local needs. Ultimately, our goal is to build an AI model made in Africa that reflects our values and development priorities, inclusive, ethical, and locally led. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ahmed. I'll come back to you, Mr. Kone. Having had the government perspective and being an intergovernmental organization, from your experience, how can Smart Africa help its member states build AI governance models that protect national sovereignty while also advancing democratic values and public interest, as Ms. Ahmed has pointed out?
Thank you very much for the questions. In the current geopolitical situations, and I like to see this all the time, the multi-stakeholder and multilateralism is a choice. But we're living in a multipolarity geopolitical moment. The only thing that should bind us together is our differences. That's why Smart Africa is here. It means we are not looking for a national AI policy. It's like a cookie cutter. One size should fit all, but all sides should fit together by preserving a human right and the digital right. And this is all drawn from the UN high level. If you look at the AI governance of the UN high level, they are structural. They are basically regulatory issue. They are national issue. The national AI governance may be a little bit different, but if you look at the common denominator based on ethical inclusion and sustainability, it has to be included in a national strategy. However, by saying that today, Africa, no single nation will be able to build an AI system alone. My sister just mentioned about the infrastructure. But you see, we need to understand, some people said, oh, Africa, you might be so behind because you only have a 40% of your population covered with the internet use. Then why are you talking about AI? That's not the question. Africa is not looking for the most powerful AI, it's looking for the most useful one, looking at the agriculture, looking at the healthcare, and looking at the education. Why? Because if you know the history, for the past 45 years since 1980, African continent has gained 1 billion people in 50. But in 45 years, if you gain 1 billion, has the number of schools increased to that rate? No. Has the hospital increased to that rate? No. Has the school and the financial sector bank have grown to that rate? No. It means for us, digital transformation, when we look at the AI, it is the evolution within the ecosystem of digital economy. But it's a revolution within itself, which means AI allow us today to actually reach indigenous people in the rural area, to educate them in their own language so they become tech savvy like anyone who's been to the university. So the way we are doing that, Smart Africa, we do have a Council of ICT Minister where Mauritania is a part of it. We have a Council of African Regulator. We have a Council of African IT Agency. And we have also the board members who are the head of the state himself. That's why we created AI Council to be able to address all of this methodically and systematically in a way that we align and we mutualize our resources to be able to face this revolution, which is the AI. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know about the audience, but I'm here nodding and taking notes frantically. We had hoped to have a private sector perspective complement the government and intergovernmental ones, but unfortunately, our virtual speaker, Shiko, has not been able to join us. Oh, sure. Please go ahead. before I go to civil society?
When we talk about a private sector perspective, I want, ladies and gentlemen, all of you to remember, today when any nation talks about the AI, they talk about a frontier model. We've seen the American talking about a frontier model, OpenAI, Llama, Gork 3, what name of. When we hear the French people talking, they are behind the Mistral. When we hear about the Chinese talking about the AI, they're talking about the DeepSeek. All of these people are private sector, which basically means the government in Africa knows very well their role. They should be creating a conducive environment for private sector to have a kind of blended financing. Because when we talk about financing, America who declare about 500 billion, French about to 200 billion. So what is Africa going to declare in terms of funding? This fund will be and should be a blended, because don't forget, we have over half dozen MNO, which is a mobile network operator, operating on our continent, who owns data center. It is existential for them to be able to get into the AI, because at the end of the day, it's about making money. So even in our financing, we should be taking that into account. That's where the role of the private sector comes in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kone. Shiko has joined us online, but before we move to him, we'll first hear from civil society and then additional perspective from government. So Nima, civil society is crucial for ensuring that AI governance serves the public good. What unique contributions can civil society make in this space, and what kinds of frameworks or coalitions are needed to support effective oversight and inclusive participation?
Thanks so much for the question. So, of course, civil society is extremely crucial to the entire process. And I'm not just biased in saying that, but we play a role as watchdogs, as advocates, as educators, as storytellers, and shaping the entire narrative about AI on the continent. And we're also there to question the political, the economic, and the social logic on why we're actually deploying AI. So there is also a narrative of the fact that AI is neutral progress, or AI is always progress, for example. But I want to put forth a few questions that we should really ask ourselves as individuals, as countries, as civil society, and like very basic questions. So why is this AI actually being deployed? Who is funding it? Who benefits from it? What harms does it create? Who gets left behind when these forms of AI are introduced? Was community consulted when AI policies or AI technologies are brought in? And is the impact of these instruments measured over time? And if it is measured over time, how is it measured? So going back to the fact that, just like how tech platforms have rules about what kind of content you can post, and these rules are often based on the political and moral ideology of whoever owns that platform. I believe too that these different, especially private sector, AI tools come embedded with values and incentives and power relations that are dependent on humans who are often in other contexts. So I believe civil society has a very strong role in a couple of things, and I'll just list them. So, for example, civil society should really play a role in the procurement process, and we need to resist this quiet import of oftentimes harmful tools, such as excessive surveillance or predictive tech. There's so much good that can come from AI, but of course there's also a lot of harms, and I think we should have a very balanced view of both. So we can't just be on the side of, AI is harmful or AI is beneficial, but really having that balanced view to think critically about why we're bringing AI in. The second one that's really important is to track the funding, to understand who is funding what in the African context and what are these different foreign interests of all these players, of all the tech giants in shaping our AI agenda. I think we need to be very critical about that as well. The third one I would say is that we need to document the lived experiences, both of the benefits and the harms, especially to marginalized communities. And yeah, we can do tech audits, of course, but I think civil society is uniquely placed to address these harms and benefits and to document them and to tell these stories so that they then go back and inform the policies. The fourth one I would say is we really need to democratize digital literacy. I feel like, we're in Oslo here having this conversation that doesn't apply to most people living on the continent. I think there's really a need to take these conversations to a grassroots level. It is extremely important for us to be represented at these high-level multi-stakeholder meetings, but that doesn't mean we do it at the cost of not involving local communities at different levels in this conversation. And yeah, I think the education needs to be accessible. It needs to be forward-looking. It needs to be for common people, for leaders in local languages. We need to use creative ways of talking about it. We can't always use these huge data governance languages and then, people's eyes glaze over because they don't really know what you're saying. We really need to make it accessible. I think that is a very urgent need. The fifth one I would say is that we also need to get back to making things. And yes, I agree with the point. We do not have the investment of that value, but it doesn't mean that we don't do anything. I want to propose that we have alternative design of products, of AI products that are based on different incentives and that, are really tailored to our needs. And so moving to the question of like what kinds of frameworks we would need, I'd say that we should really have mandatory public interest impact assessments. So I touched upon that earlier. But it would be lovely if before an AI system is deployed that, we do assessments of what it can impact, who it will impact, and that, throughout the process of having it, we continue to do these assessments. And we understand how it impacts, social, economic, gendered, environmental impacts of these AI systems. The next one, I think we need regional civic coalitions. So it's amazing to bring governments together to talk about AI, but what other groups are we leaving out? What silos are we creating when we bring these groups together? Who is missing at this conversation, at this table, for example? So, women's rights organizations, trade unions, journalists, researchers, can we all come together to shape these policies and that they're not just done at a very high government level? The third one, again, going to my colleague's point, is funding. We really need better frameworks for how we are going to fund AI on the continent. We need to come up with our own funding models for innovation in a way that is sustainable, in a way that we bring young people in to actually create products. I feel like that is quite a bit of a missing link. And then the last one, I think, is, just bringing as many stakeholders into the conversation as possible, and then just questioning how are we going to operationalize all these beautiful policies and frameworks that we're talking about. So how do we take it from this table here, actually putting it on the ground and actually seeing it in action? So thank you so much.
Thanks, Nima. What you're saying resonates a lot with me, coming from civil society, but absolutely what was also said from the government and intergovernmental perspective. Malindi, I'll move over to you. In anticipation of South Africa's G20 presidency, which has a very strong focus on digital governance, how can AI maturity assessments be leveraged to strengthen context-specific governance across Africa? And a sub-question to that is, what role do institutional readiness, democratic safeguards, and inclusive policy making play?
No, thank you for that question. As the country, South Africa, we assume the G20 presidency, and I think it's important to note our banner there is solidarity, sustainability, and equality. So we see that we are presented with a unique opportunity to lead a new chapter in the digital governance, not only for ourselves, but also, for the continent at large. I think it's important to note that, one of the powerful tools that we can use is the AI maturity assessments. There is one that we did work with the GIZ in terms of the South Africa, which we participated on, and one of the areas that we picked up is that, these assessments, they allow us as governments to diagnose the strength, identify the gaps, but also chart, a clear, actionable pathways for the responsible AI adoption. But also, it's important to note that they are not just technical diagnostics, they are also political governance instruments. So if we apply them with purpose, you'll find that they can actually be transformative in nature. And I think they can actually assist in terms of the African-led, governance frameworks. But now, if I can just also look onto, how we can anchor them into the African realities, you'll find that too often, the benchmarks are normally imported wholesale benchmarks, which are normally failing to account for the governance challenges such as limited compute infrastructure, fragmented data ecosystems, or linguistic diversity. And these are some of the area things that are very critical when you look into the African continent. So for then the South Africa and our continental peers, so we are advocating that we need to develop and localize these tools to reflect our developmental priorities, which then include inclusive service delivery, ethical public sector automation, as well as community trust. But also it's important to recognize that institutional readiness is the cornerstone for any AI governance framework. We do understand that as policymakers, policy alone are sometimes not enough, but we need some of the institutions that are technically equipped, policy coherent, and operationally agile. So one of the areas that we are currently doing as a country is the development of an AI policy for the country. And I mean, the policy, it does have, broad statements that we are looking into. And I must say that we have been quite behind in terms of that. But at least we are on the final stages. And I think if I can just highlight just a few areas that we are looking on as a country, it is the area of capacity development, where we are looking on strengthening the AI-related education. And these are some of the things that also came, from when we are unpacking, the policy, the frameworks that we looked onto. But also we're looking on the areas of AI for economic transformation, where we are looking in terms of AI as well in public service delivery, but also supporting the startups as well as through regulatory sandboxes. The other area we're looking on is the area of responsible governance. So we are advocating on some of, various bodies that needs to be established, which includes your ethics board, AI ethics board, National AI Commission, and the AI regulatory authority, because we feel that some of the regulators that we've got might not be, up to purpose in terms of, regulating AI. But also the areas of ethical and inclusive AI, where we're looking on developing, localized ethical standards, but also cultural preservation and international integration, but as well as human-centered approach. And I mean, if you were to look on all these broad aspects, you'll find that, some of the work that the colleagues are saying, it also aligns to that. Because you'll find that, while we are developing these policies, you'll find that there are some challenges that are deep-rooted into our societies, which include now currently, if you look on digital divide, you'll find that we still have got a digital divide as a continent, which we need to address to make sure that, AI, whenever we put, these frameworks, they can address that. But also, if we were to look on the compute capabilities, you'll find that, we still don't have compute capabilities in the continent. So it's one of the things then that we need to make sure that we address significantly as part of us developing the governance frameworks. But I also want to add the other area that we also need to embed, the democratic safeguards into every layer of the AI development and deployment, because we see that without robust mechanisms for transparency, public accountability, as well as and recourse, AI can deepen exclusion, entrench bias, or even erode civil liberties. So democratic governance in this age of AI means placing human rights and constitutional values at the center, from the procurement processes to the algorithmic audits. And I think the last point that I want to add critically is the role of inclusive policymaking. AI governance cannot just be a technocratic role, but it needs to be, brought into broader society with all players being at the center. We need to make sure that we do have active participation from academia, civil society, youth innovators, private sector, as well as the grassroots communities. So that's where then, as a country, we are trying to lead by an example and hosting the multi-stakeholder forums and platforms, also embedding, participatory design and ensuring that, the marginalized voices help shape the future of AI. It's one of the areas that we're going to be doing also in terms of the AI for Africa initiative, which is an initiative that is coming from our AI task force. It's going to be in South Africa in September, end of September. So I'd like, some of the colleagues that are here to attend that session as well, because it's where we would like as a continent to actually look broadly in terms of AI and how we can actually drive the AI in innovation in the Africa, including the governance thereof. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melindy. We are looking very keenly and proudly at South Africa as it steers the G20 presidency, and we hope these are issues that will be driven forward during the tenure. Our fifth speaker online, Shiko Gital, was able to join us, and I would like to put the question on private sector's role back to him. Private companies are at the forefront of AI innovation, Shiko. From your experience, what governance frameworks are necessary to ensure this innovation aligns with democratic values, and how can the private sector contribute to trust, transparency, and accountability of AI, which have been resounding issues from all the speakers here?
Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Thumbs
we
up.
can.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm joining in from very cold and rainy Nairobi. And I'm really glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And apologies for joining in late. So the question around private sector and what private sector can do is starts with building an enabling environment. A couple of months ago, I was speaking to a group of like policymakers and government were asking, what do you need? We just need governments to understand the potential of the space we are in. AI is not a passing fad. It is not a buzzword that is going away. It's a consequential technology for our generation. And we need to be able to take care of that. And by building an enabling environment, I was hearing the interventions from Engineer Kone and those ones from the representative from South Africa, and they're quite interesting. But how do you then move that from paper to pavement? How do we do that? Is incentivizing private sector to come, and I hear the conversation around compute, around talent development. What does that actually mean in actual sense? I'll give an example. Is we have been working with a number of like governments on one hand, but also startups, and trying to understand is what do you need for you to succeed? Because there's so many pilots that are happening on the African continent, but they're not getting any traction. But then you soon realize is that we are building all these things in the AI space, but our market does not understand AI, does not know what AI is, and the potential that AI has to, and what's the difference between what we're doing right now and what they were being sold for 5 years ago with mobile internet. And being able to concretize that to our market base, our customer base, our user base is critical. And while it is the work of the government to educate the populace, it is the work of the private sector to actually create massive awareness. But if the government comes in to interrupt this, that there is a challenge. So, for example, this week we are running an AI awareness, fluency, and literacy campaign across the continent in 6 markets, in 6 countries. And what we are targeting is teachers. And you're not going through the normal, going through ministries of ICT or ministries of education. We are working with teachers directly through their associations, through their communities to train them. And in this, we started last week, and in this week, what the difference and the demand is very different. The first one, we did a baseline study. There's a lot of fear around AI. What we are hearing right now is, can we continuously do this training over the next 6 months? What is the incentive that the governments that we are working with have done is they've given us free space to create this programming. And they said, once you're done with the pilot, because we are calling it a pilot, send us a report. That is a very concrete way of showing private sector is we as government don't know what actually need to be done, but if you can pilot and give us results, you can be able to scale whatever you're doing, or we can be able to create even more space for you. Similarly to investment in the startup sector in compute. So enabling private sector to invest in compute does not mean hindering what government can do in compute. And I totally agree with Engineer Kone saying that funding for Africa has to be a blended instrument. And it means that private sector will have to invest in some of these compute facilities. Some of it will be extremely expensive. But on the other hand, government and donor organizations have to invest in the earlier stages of this compute, because we need to be able to have researchers and startups building, and they cannot be able to afford the enterprise grade computing that will be sold to them by enterprise versions. So it is bringing this blended thinking and creating the enabling environment. From a democratic point of view, every time I hear democratizing this, democratizing that, I say, what's the definition of democracy you're talking about? And for me, democratizing means that it's enabling everybody everywhere to have access to the same opportunities and resources. Yeah. And if you're going to be able to bring that democratic tendency in AI, it means that even the policies that we are making are not being prescribed to Africa. Yeah. So what we have seen is we need policies and policy frameworks, as rightly said by South Africa, that are enabling the ecosystem. But who is drafting these policies? What agenda do they have? Do they have Africa at heart when they are doing this? Those are the questions we should be asking. And who is doing this? It's enabling young Africans to be able to contribute to some of this conversation. So, for example, one of these things we are doing we actually support from Smart Africa is this African Scientific Panel that is calling to young Africans, both in the continent and in diaspora, to enable and support their governments and governments across the continent in drafting some of these conversations, some of these frameworks that you've spoken about. But beyond drafting and writing them out is bringing them to life. So, for example, there's a compute project and a benchmarking project that is being run by 25 doctors from across the world with African heritage to look at these models for healthcare responding to African needs and African reality. That is what democratizing means. It's creating, again, it starts with creating the enabling environment, getting out of the way, but also then starting to resource and accepting help from the democratized environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shiko. The clock, tell you, is moving much faster than it should, so we need to speed this up a bit. Because we're here to learn and exchange, I'd like to give an opportunity to our participants to share any comments, reactions, or questions to the 5 speakers. There are microphones on either side of the room there. Please feel free to walk over, introduce yourself, and share your comment, reaction, or question. As those in the room make their way to the microphone, I will also check with our online moderator if there are any questions from the online participants. No questions from the online participants, but I see one participant walking to the microphone. The floor is yours, sir.
It's fine. Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you very much. I'm a little bit tall. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Honorable Alhaji Mbo from the Gambia, and the question actually I have is, with all, it seems like each African country, or most of them, are on the path of creating their own policy. And I'm trying to find out from Smart Africa in particular, what can you do to bring all these countries on the table where I know that each country has your own, different way of doing things, but at least there must be a convergence where we can actually have a policy that could be used from all across the country, like we had in the African Union Convention on the Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. Can we have something that that goes across the continent instead of everybody being in silos? And again, it's going to take a very long time before that is done. So I want to ask Mr. Kone to see if they can bring everybody on the table, at least try to work onto a common platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alhaji. We have a second question. We'll take that before coming back to the speakers.
Good evening, everyone. Is it? Okay. My name is Lydia Lamisa Akamwaraba from Ghana. Looking at the team up there, AI readiness in Africa in a shifting geopolitical landscape. Yes, it's true. But we need those kind of policies that will create the enable environment that will bring trust in the African society. Because currently, Africa is one of the youngest population that we have in the world. And the youth has a challenge, whether AI is coming to take over their jobs. So we as policymakers need to build that trust. I want to find out, what are we doing to bring that trust among the youth in Africa? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Lydia. Yes, sir. If you walk a little bit quicker to the microphone, we'll take your question.
Good day, everyone. My name is Peter King. I'm from Liberia. Mine is in the form of a comment as well. I realized that there are 4 key areas that I can talk about. In Africa now, what all we are looking at, there are a lot of paper work on policies, but we're forgetting to look at the issue of digital literacy, the level of infrastructure, and these are things that once we are looking at readiness, this should come to the fore. So to the panel up there, thank you so much for the nice presentation. Can you help us to understand better, from our context from Africa, what are the realistic steps that governments can do to ensure that this is a reality in terms of being ready, to ensure that youth alone, as is claimed and is real that Africa have a youthful population? These are challenges. We're looking at what are the opportunities. Can they be leveraged for the youth to use it? We are always using it. The OpenAI, the ChatGPT is not created by Africa. So where do we go from here? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Peter King. So we have 11 minutes to the end of the session. So we're going to do a crash course in closing remarks, responses to questions, and final thoughts, all in one go. So I'll invite Mr. Kone to take the question that was directed specifically at you. And then for the rest of the speakers, we'll reflect on the questions and issues around trust and realistic steps that have come from the floor, while at the same time sharing concluding remarks on what the future should look like 5 years from now. So Mr. Kone first.
Thank you very much for the questions regarding policy harmonization on the national AI strategy. As I said before, what really matters is not like one size should fit all, because each country has a sovereignty you have to take into account, but we have to make sure that each size should fit together. So what we've engaged in since April, we've actually scanned our continent. We found there's close to about 17 to 18 countries who already developed, including, of course, Nigeria, including Mauritania, who have developed already the national AI strategy. So what we did, actually, we took all of these national AI strategy, and we also looked into the AI governance regulatory environment developed by the high level of the United Nations, what it entails exactly. And we actually look also into the African Union AI strategy. So we try to do a comparison to come up with a benchmarking. What are the countries saying? Are they addressing exactly what is required from the United Nations How does it compare to Europe, and how does it compare also to the African Union? So we're coming out with the benchmarking, and this is also part of the work we are doing for the AI Council for Africa. Starting from this July, of course, we'll be having a CMICT, which is a Council of ICT Ministers, and we'll be sharing with them. We'll say, if you look at the national AI strategy of Nigeria, what was the best lesson learned from that compared to what Egypt has? Because you might see that Egypt, for example, is probably skewed towards more startup action, the startup hubs and creations, while you will see that Nigeria is actually focused on something else. So we've compiled all of these, and of course, we not only talking, we actually walking our talk. What I'm saying exactly, this would be shared with our Council of ICT Ministers, which from there it goes to the regulator. But it's very true. So far now, we have about 19 countries who have a different AI strategy. But we need to remember something. If you look at the fundamentals, which are the common denominator, looking at the ethical use of the AI, looking at the inclusion of the AI, inclusion of the inclusivity, if I said, and looking also at sustainability, 90% of those AI national strategy, it addresses it. However, you may elaborate the best AI national strategy, but is it conducive for private sector investment? That is the one question we need to ask, because at the end of the day, government should be creating law and regulation to create a conducive environment for private sector to be able to chip in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kone. Still on my right, Ms. Ahmed, reactions to the questions from the floor, as well as concluding remarks on what the future of AI in the continent should look like.
Thank you very much. I want to comment some reaction of the audience. I'm totally agree with that walking in silo will not solve the problem, but at least we need to look after a synergy between different initiatives. But the important question is how, because as you know, the context of each country is different, and even the context of the region in Africa is different. So we need to think out of the box to find solution that's suitable for everyone context. So about the future of Africa AI, as we shape African AI, we must lead with principle. Data must remain, in my understanding, data must remain in African hands. Because as you know, in the era of digital and especially in the era of AI, sovereignty is not just territorial, but also digital. Second conclusion that I can mention, that equitable and democratic AI is only possible if policies power local communities, protect citizen rights, and foster homegrown innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Machane. I'll move to my middle now because I see Shiko on my screen in front of me. Shiko, reactions to the questions from the floor, as well as concluding remarks on AI's future on the continent to ensure sovereignty, equity, and democracy.
Thank you very much. I want to respond to the question that the gentleman from the Gambia asked. So for the past year and a half, we were looking and doing a scan on what is the right governance framework for Africa. And what we concluded is not everybody needs a strategy. A strategy needs to be thought through, but what are the instruments that needs to be in place for you as a government to be able to start on this AI journey? And so what we have developed and what was launched in April was the African AI Governance Toolkit. If you go to qbit.africa, qbit.africa, you should be able to see it. And it enables you as a government official, a regulator, a ministry, to be able to see, should I just have like AI principles that are guiding our work around AI? Should we have a policy framework should we have a strategy and a simple cheat sheet that you can walk through and work through to help you develop the principles, I mean, as outlined by Engineer Kone, of safety, ethics, and such, to be able to develop like a very simple policy policy framework or a principle guideline or a strategy that will help you on this AI journey, because recognize that not every country is able to invest in having an AI strategy, or it's a little bit premature. There are a couple of countries you're working with in Central Africa where they're starting with a digital strategy, not even an AI strategy, but they need to start working on AI. So a simple framework is what we are trying to work with them to be able to start on the journey. On the second one, I love the second question because from Ghana, and it's a very critical question. But I always say you cannot work on what you cannot measure. So we're talking about talent, maturity, all these questions. But does anyone know where you stand? Does Ghana know where they stand in terms of AI maturity on the African continent or in the world, or where you stand about your talent readiness? So again, the other instrument that we've worked, and again, as Engineer Kone mentioned, around the AI Council, is developing the African AI Maturity Index, which is a live document, a live tool, not a document, a live tool that is constantly being updated as the different strategies are being put in place, different policies are being put in place. So if you go to data wall, DATA wall, WALL.Africa, you'll be able to see the maturity, and we've broken it down to very, very simple metrics. It's broken down to the schools that are teaching STEM in our country. So it's very, very granular to help you realize, as you're solving for this AI, maybe we start introducing more STEM courses, not even AI courses, in our country. The second one is the talent index, which is
Shiko,
primarily
sorry,
is
I'm going to have
focusing.
to interrupt you.
I'm finishing.
10 more seconds.
This is my last one.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. And this is measuring what talent actually means and what you need to put in place. Again, it's being very actionable. And what should Africa do? I'm very bullish about Africa. If you've heard me speak, is I always say Africa can, and we can win this AI race, because, as I always quote Engineer Kone, is because we are defining what the race is about. We are not following other people's rules. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shiko. So Lindy and then Nima. The race is on. 1 minute each.
No, thank you. I think I just want to touch a bit on what the questions were raised and the issue of the public trust. One of the areas that I feel that as policymakers we need to do is the area of public participation. I know that most of the time our youth are not understanding, of what we do as policymakers and what the policymaking process involves. So I think it's one of the areas that we need to focus on significantly. But the area of digital literacy, and one of the things that we're trying to do as a country in South Africa is trying to look on how we can change the curriculum, because if now you keep on putting these small interventions, I think they are not really assisting much. Yes, you do some training interventions, but they don't assist much. But if we can change the curriculum significantly so that it can reflect our current realities. Then in terms of closing remarks, I just want to say that we do understand that, data is the foundation for AI, and we have to ensure that African nations do have control over how their data is collected, stored, and accessed, and also is used and is essential to protect our sovereignty, drive equitable development, as well as uphold democratic legitimacy. So without a strong data governance rooted in the African legal frameworks, you will find that the AI systems can reinforce the dependency. Thank you.
Thank you, Melindy. Nima?
All right, 40 seconds.
Yes.
All right, I just want to answer really quickly the question on trust and education, because I actually think they go together in terms of the future of young African people. And my position is that I'm going to echo my colleague, the entire curriculum needs to change from primary school. We inherited colonial systems of education. They no longer serve us, and they no longer are preparing young Africans for the future. We have to re-question how we are teaching, this factory method of teaching in classrooms where you move in that manner, first of all, and also how are we assessing people? Like everyone's submitting, at least where I'm doing my PhD, a lot of students are submitting AI assessments. What are you grading as a teacher? So the whole way that we even assess skills needs to completely change. And in terms of my closing remarks, I think we need to continue to have radical and critical questions about AI. Always, always, always question everything. What are the harms? What are the benefits? How is it serving our future? How is it serving the future of our youth? Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. 28 seconds for me to wrap up this very rich discussions. Quite clearly, it's not yet Uhuru for AI in Africa, but given what's been discussed here, with the right investments, the continent stands to benefit significantly. I think the areas for prioritizations that have come through include pushing for accountability, public education, transparency, inclusion, not only from a language perspective, a gender perspective, and ensuring co-creation, infrastructure investments, multi-stakeholder consultation and participation, impact assessments, that was a very, very good one, funding, procurement, and ensuring that, policies are not just prescriptions, but actually live up to reality. Thank you so much. We appreciate the perspectives that have been shared from Cote d'Ivoire, from Mauritania, from Ghana, from the floor, from Gambia, from South Africa, as well as Uganda. Once again, thank you to the speakers. Thank you to the organizers, BMC. We appreciate the conversation and ensuring that discourse about AI readiness on the continent is making it to the global stage, i.e. the IGF. Thank you very much. We wish you all a very good evening and thank you for attending the session.